So when we think about global issues, part of what we got to do is really go through the examples of global issues and what those are. And while this list is not exhaustive, this is a really good place to start. So we're talking about population, hunger, development, human rights, energy, weapons of mass destruction, environment, terrorism, peacekeeping, technology, and perhaps even the future of the nation state. Are we always going to be organized in such a way? And let's run through some of these now. So the issue of population at least involves three broad questions. Are we talking about too many people, too few resources, or are we also talking about too few people who are using too many resources? And the real challenge is the population as a global issue is talking about all of those. When you just look at the growth of population, along since people have been on the planet, it's extraordinary where we go through this long period of time. Until the 1800s, where we hit 1 billion for the first time, and then that growth has just been exponential. And when you think about what we said the characteristics of global issues are, here's where you can really see that exponential growth. If you look at where too many people lie, this map, this is called a cartogram, really gives us some insight, and it allows you to see those geographic and political borders of the world a little bit differently. If you think about people on the move as part of the population, this is where they're immigrating from or exiting from, and is one way to also population. But you can also see it from a standpoint of who's consuming the most, and you can see how that changes in our viewpoint. And hunger's another global issue. One of the things about the contemporary world is we live in a place that certainly there's enough food for everyone, but people still go hungry. And whether it's those kinds of pictures of starving children or children with not enough to eat, that issue of hunger is a global issue and requires collective response too. The issue of development is one that's often fraught with at least two questions. Is it about generating wealth or alleviating poverty? And do those two questions take us to the same place? And there's lots of strategies for this as an issue. Human poverty, if we just look at that scale alone, takes us, you can see again from some of the cartograms that we've used earlier, about where the intensity perhaps lies greatest. Healthcare spending, I think, is another interesting way in which to see it. And then just in terms of disease, where in this particular case HIV, where it's certainly the most prominent part of the world, various ways to look at development. When we get to the subject of human rights, this is clearly one that's relatively new. It's really only been since the end of the Second World War and the UN Declaration of Human Rights that we've talked about those things. And part of the question here is, do humans have rights simply by being human? And what do those rights look like? Are some rights more important than others? Are they individual liberties? Are they rights to freedom of press, rights free speech, freedom of religion? Are they right to jobs? Are they right to a decent job? Are they right to a holiday? Are they right to leisure? Are they right to marriage? And of course, we know all the challenges with breaking those things down. Energy is also a global issue. One of the striking things about human existence on this planet is that just our current form of energy is one that we're highly dependent upon, oil and petroleum, but it's also the first time in human existence that we've had a form of energy that is non-renewable. What happens when the transition from oil, what do we transition to? And who controls that energy is clearly part and parcel that makes it a global issue, and how it gets distributed, what it looks like, and where it comes from. Are all in part of that. And is there a window into what that looks like? Is there enough? Is our demand great enough that renewable sources can provide us those energy sources needs? Well, they can't at the moment, and that transition is makes it a global issue. I've often thought that one of the most challenging global issues is weapons of mass destruction, whether they're nuclear, whether they're biological or chemical in nature. And this is not just the latest weapon when we sort of look at the growth of the history of weapons and warfare. There's something fundamentally categorically different about weapons of mass destruction. It's not just the scale of that destruction, but it's also that they are so devastating that in some ways they now call war into question. And that exponential growth here in terms of destruction certainly makes it a global issue. It's relatively new, and need for a collective response brings it on to bear. And the recent challenges of that in Syria and Iraq and North Korea bring that clearly into the forefront. The environment's a global issue, whether we're talking about issues of climate change, whether we're talking about how those things fit and the effects that they're having there, whether we're talking about deforestation and those sorts of challenges, radioactive waste, desertification, and it's really that process of land turning into desert. Water pollution. I think one of the challenging things that we live in a world today where only 60%, I believe that is that number of the world has access to safe and clean drinking water. And one of the things that we know as humans, no matter where we live, we are dependent upon water and oxygen, therefore making air pollution a real challenging one. And here's a scene from China and the daily challenges that are dealt with there. When we move past the environment and start looking at forms of technology, one of the things that really makes this a global issue worth our attention is, who has it? Who has technology, and does it provide means for us to deal with that and access of making lives improved, or and those parts of the world that don't have it, and all the challenges that are associated with that. Terrorism, absolutely a global issue. How to respond to it, what to do about it, how to prevent it, and when terrorism does happen, what do we do from a peacekeeping standpoint? From what's our response look like? What do we do when we have parts of the world who clearly are not able to defend themselves, but in the only way to address them involves some sort of international response, be it the UN blue helmets that you see here and those peacekeepers, or some coalition of other militaries around the world. That makes it a global issue for sure. And it's also the future of the nation state is probably worth asking ourselves what is to be done. And this is really a question mark. If we have, some almost 200 different nation states in the world, part of what we've got to ask ourselves when we've moved from civilizations to empires to states, is this always how humans are going to organize themselves? Have we reached the zenith of terms of how we politically and socially organize ourselves in such a way? And the question really becomes, if we are currently organized in a world in which states are each pursuing their interests, a critical part when studying about global issues is raising this question, and that's who is looking out for the globe's interests. When we have a whole series of issues that are called global issues, that question's got to be first and foremost in our mind, and that's probably our biggest challenge during the course of this particular class. So we really welcome you to those challenges of global issues. They're daunting. They don't go away, and they're not going to go away this semester, and perhaps not go in your lifetime, but the policies that will emerge on how these issues get addressed are your challenges this semester. They're going to be how do we address them? We've got to have some sense of understanding what they are, but what kind of policies, what sort of actions, what sort of prescriptions do we offer to deal with these kinds of challenges? And we look forward to allowing you to walk with us the challenges of this course, and really working on policies, seeing what they'll emerge, policy prescriptions to best address those challenges.